Awesome. So I want to talk about one of my favorite lessons, and it's the climactic lesson. It's about halfway through the first course in the program. And the name of the lesson is Influence Tradecraft. We actually learn 7 influence tradecrafts, and the students oftentimes will develop their own from those 7 frameworks. The one I want to talk about, and the one that we have a number of case studies for, is what I like to call, and the folks in Green Beret communities, ODA communities, MARSOC communities, and a Special Operations Command, where we call it oftentimes, or what I call it and kind of force it on people, is this thing called consonance and resonance. And I was inspired by, a couple decades ago, by music theory and the study of physics. So in consonance, we have parts that agree. So for example, 2 consonant notes, it's not necessarily the same note, but they're notes that they complement each other. They sound good with one another. And then resonance in the literal sense is through a distance, is trying to get something to vibrate. So if you have a musical instrument across the room, there's certain notes that you can play, and those strings will have a certain slight resonance. So in the first part, practically speaking, we try to find movements whose goals are in consonance with our goals, us being the influence protagonist. Now, what that does not mean is our enemy's enemy is our friend at all. It also certainly does not mean arming anybody. It does not mean that we're not talking about working with the next Viet Minh or the next Los Zetas. Instead, what we're talking about is indirectly, as silently, as invisibly as possible, is to find and analyze movements, again, whose goals share long-term U.S., in the case of the U.S. government goals. But we also want to make sure that those movements are forces for stability in the future. So specifically, certain networks that increase public support for legitimate governance, that decrease public support for malign influence, malign actors, destabilizing actors, and increase societal capacity and community cohesion so people can do for themselves. They can overcome the problems on their own without any kind of outside help necessarily. So we don't want to always put that thumbprint of, let's say, the US government or a corporation or business or another government onto a movement. Because very often these movements, they're influential because they're independent, because they're not seen as pawns of some government. So we don't want to accidentally put a thumbprint on something that is working. So in addition to consonance, or the second part is, again, resonance. And we go over a number of real-world case studies on how do you connect certain networks without them knowing that you had a strong hand. Well, a lot of intermediaries help. There are things that we can do with social media, for example, and search engine optimization. There are ways that you can make certain items go viral depending on the week, the algorithm, and the platform, of course, but we do learn the details and exactly how to do that. And again, the idea is that we don't want not only the networks themselves to know that they're getting this boost, but that their followers or people that will be following them in the future as they get bigger, as they increase in strength and influence, that again, they are not seen as pawns. So that's consonance and resonance in a nutshell. Again, we want to look for groups, organizations that are forces for stability, they're resilient, robust, or anti-fragile, that they bounce back from hardship, groups that, again, really are temporarily aligned to our long-term national security goals, and that will not be destabilizing actors, again, in the future. Some people call this international relations by very subtle proxy, especially when there is no money, there's no hardware, there's certainly no weapons or anything like that involved.